Boy, it has it's been a week. It's been a week. And I sat on this video thinking, obviously tomorrow I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it. I obviously know what it's about. Um this week's already been bad enough as it is. We lost Dolly Parton. We lost Tim Curry. We lost a lot of good people, but today was like I want to say it was, and I'm just making this. I don't even. I'm just making this. The cast doesn't even know I'm doing it because, like I said, I know they're gonna. I know we're gonna talk about it tomorrow, and I'm sure they're gonna have their 2 cents on it, and a lot of them are going to. But I wanted to get some time on this because a lot of people think he was just a voice actor or something like that, but they don't really know. And obviously, I think everybody kind of knows the news I'm talking about, and that is that we lost Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime. As you can see, kind of a big deal for me, Yeah, I was at work today, and I don't know what it was this week. Every day I was at work, I would get a text. Like Wednesday it was, or Tuesday it was Dolly Parton. Wednesday it was Tim Curry, and then it literally got to the point I was texting my family about all this, and my family was my sister-in-law was like, "Tyler, stop being the bearer of bad news. Stop talking about it." And then today it was a friend of mine, my fellow ghost hunter David Whitney. He's the one who messaged me and said, "Hey, Peter Cullen passed away." At first, I was like, "There's no fucking way." I mean, I know he's 85, but there's no way. And the weird thing is, when I announced it in the group chat, and I'm going to be truthful. I announced in the group chat, I'm like, well, there's three. And everybody's right. Bad news comes in three. We lost these three people. We lost a lot more than three. And Kluge was going to go up to a convention last month, I believe, up in Chicago. He was supposed to go to a convention where Peter Cullen was going to be at, but Cullen canceled his appearance, which kind of made the suggestion, hey, maybe he was sick. Maybe that's why he canceled it. Don't know. But it's kind of one of those things, and I know some people, I know I'm not probably not going to get a lot of people watching this. I get it. Not a lot of people are into it like I am. I'm sending out links and all that stuff. But the reason it kind of hits for me is not just because he was a voice of a character. There's been other voices for Optimus Prime, and there will be other voices. And this whole video is not to bash any of them, not Gary Chalk or any of the other guys who've done a fantastic job, but because it kind of today I kind of reflected back on like my childhood and how it was growing up. When I was a kid, when I was born in 85. My father worked an overnight shift at a business here in Jacksonville called Capitol Records. Capitol Records made records, tape cassettes, CDs, that kind of stuff. And he would work long overnights, and he would work like he'd work long overnights, and he'd work like almost 6 to 7 days a week just to provide. My mother worked in a nursing home quite frequently. And they had to provide for me and then eventually my sister, who was born about 5 years later in 1990. So me and my sister during these times, we would be, eventually 5 years later, my sister, we would be traded off to babysitters, I guess you could say. There was a list, a list of people. And one of the shows, some of the shows, growing up in the 80s and 90s, you're blessed to watch all these great shows, and during that time, there were shows like Ninja Turtles was big, G.I. Joe, Masters of the Universe, Transformers, that kind of thing. And one of the things about Transformers I liked, and one of the things I really enjoyed was Optimus Prime. And it's interesting because I made in my Facebook post today, and I made a good point. This was a character who is based. I want you to think about this, the ridiculousness of this character. He's a character, he's a giant robot alien that turns into a truck, but somehow had more humanity than most humans do in this modern age. That's the part that's kind of like, um it's interesting too. But I've always I think it was because of the fact that all this reminds me of my youth and reminds me of, where I come from. And I think that's why, like, this death hurt more, because I say this was the last voice of my childhood. This was the last one. I would say, and I mean, he was 85 years old, so he'd lived a good life. He'd done a lot. And he was also the voice of Eeyore. He was the voice of, he done a lot. He was the voice of the Predator. If you don't, he was the voice of the Predator. He did the audio for the Predator. I don't know who a John Keane is. I'm sorry. I think you're in the wrong show, buddy. But he did like the vocalizations for it, which was interesting. It was interesting too. We have Will Hite on the show. Will Hite's a Marine. Peter has said in interviews before that he based the character of Optimus Prime and how Optimus talked and how he acted, his demeanor, based upon his brother, Larry Cullen, who is a Marine. So I guess you could say that Prime was a Marine, so Will Hite can hold that against me, being a lowly soldier and all that stuff. But being Army, and I've seen so many people all over social media. Like, I thought when they announced he had passed, I thought I'd see a few people post about it, but I've seen a lot of people post about it. I've seen a lot of people. I saw, I think I see, and I hate to say this because I'm not trying to sound, but I've seen more people post about his passing than Tim Curry or Dolly Parton's, which it's like, it's been a horrible week too, and we've lost 3, and I hope to God that's it and we're done. 2026 can fuck off. It was interesting too because the other night I mentioned that Tim Curry was the ultimate 80s and 90s supervillain. You loved him when he was the bad guy. You loved him when he was at his peak goofy villain. And here I would say we lost the perfect 80s, one of the perfect 80s and 90s good guys. I have never met Peter, but the stories I have heard is what really kind of made me enjoy the character more. Those little behind the scenes stories. You hear all the stories about people who met William Shatner, and Shatner turns out to be a dick. But you're like, but he's Captain Kirk. He's supposed to be calm, cool, collected, and all this. Peter Cullen was different because he was always very upfront and very joyful around the fans who met him. And that's why, like, some people would sit there and say he was the father of a generation, because he really was. I mean, granted, yes, some of the lines they wrote for the character in the show that was meant to be, to sell a toy, but he later revealed some of the lines he did in the show were technically improv. He technically improvised them. There was one article I read there was a guy. He was a truck driver. He'd always been a fan of the show, and he was dealing with really, really bad depression, just very bad depression one day. He got tickets to go to a convention where Cullen was going to be. And he decided, well, I'm going to go see him. You know, this is my childhood hero. And so he goes to this convention, and sure enough, there is this small, elderly gentleman signing autographs, signing action figures, and smiling about it. And the guy walks up and gets his autograph, and Peter goes, so what do you do for a living? And the guy kind of hesitantly says, I drive a truck. And Peter's like, oh, you drive a truck? I played a truck. And they have a little bit of a conversation. And then eventually it comes out, the guy talks about how he's been massively depressed. He'd had a lot go on in his life, and he was thinking about, opting out, as I call it. You have to say it differently for Facebook and YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. And at which point in the story, Peter gets up from behind the table, walks in front of the table, goes up to him, puts his hands on his shoulders, and says in the prime voice, if you were to do it, I would miss you. Because one of the things thank you, Harry. You have a good night too. And at that point, the guy broke down crying, and the story continued that he eventually did go get help. He did go see a counselor. He got, his life together, the depression under control, and eventually, he recovered from this crippling depression. And he said every time he went and saw a movie, every time he went and saw, an episode, every time Optimus Prime rolled in, he started crying a little bit and smiling. Like, that's the guy who literally saved my life. And it's those kind of stories, and there's so many. There's a sea of them. There's a sea of them. When I was a kid, I shared how I found the show. I could share more about what it meant to me, I guess. During the time that me and my sister were bouncing back and forth between babysitters, between my great aunt Sandy to my grandma Wyatt to a neighbor down the street to a neighbor across the road, my father lost his job. They were cutting back. They needed to save money. And unfortunately, he was making too much, according to them. It's factory job quota. That's how it is. So he eventually had to go get a job as a mechanic, but that took a dip in our finances. We didn't have cable growing up. I didn't have cable. A lot of kids talked about how they watched shows like Boy Meets World or whatever, MTV, all this shit. The only thing I had was Fox 55, NBC Channel 20, PBS, and WAND St. Louis Channel 11. And those, if you remember, those four networks in the 90s, only one of them had the good shit, and that was Fox 55. You had Batman, the A-Man series, you had X-Men, you had Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. But I think the thing was like, you would try and find something to watch. So you would go and you would watch whatever you could. And then when you found WAND, when Channel 11 would come in on those nights where it was storming really good, and then it would stay for a while, and then just slowly fade out till the next storm comes in. It's antenna. You young children don't get it. But if you were lucky, you got to catch a couple episodes of Transformers or G.I. Joe, the stuff you grew up with. And you would catch it, you would watch it, and you would have, you would enjoy this. You would enjoy the life you have. When the original movie, when I found out there was a movie, we were at Prestige Video here in Jacksonville, back when you could go rent videos. And of course, I saw this. My grandparents had bought me a few action figures. My mother and my father, where is he? Should have got this out before we did this. Bought me that guy right there. That is what's called the G2 Optimus. And back then that guy cost like $40 or like either 20 or $40. I can't remember. But back then that money went someplace. Back then these guys were, by our standards, they're technically cheap. But back then they were like, oh, how am I going to recover from $20? It was the price of inflation, money, and all that stuff. And that's one of my cherished items right there is that figure. But I remember that Christmas, But anyways, I'll get to that here in a minute. When I watched the movie, I had only seen a few episodes. I was in love with it. I didn't know who the characters were. I knew who Optimus was. I knew who Megatron, Soundwave were. And I know there's a big myth, or I guess you could say the big controversy that the movie has a high body count for a kid's show. And I thought it was the coolest shit I'd ever seen. I thought it was cool because I was sitting there watching this and I'm like, oh, that guy just got his head blown off. That guy's got a hole in his chest. That guy just vaporized. Wow. And I'm loving this. And then when they get to Prime's death, it was like, when they got to Prime's death, I didn't cry over it because I had watched previous movies like, where the main character does die in the end. And I was okay with it. I wasn't sad. I wasn't upset. It was sad because it was like, damn, I like him. Sucks that he dies. But I wasn't like some of those kids who, ran out of the living room, all that stuff. And of course, they brought him back like a year later, come to find out, because they realized, oh, we made a mistake. And I think the thing is, too, is like, why it means something special to me, and why this figure here that's sitting on my desk right now means something special to me, is because that Christmas of '93, when my father we had to have our first Christmas without my father's job at that factory, where he's working out in the frozen ass snow, where he's working out in the elements. He's going to mechanic shops and he's getting on the hard concrete to work hours on end on cars. My mother is working for, a housekeeping job on top of doing like making crafts for a craft shop, and all that stuff. When I say that my family and I come from poverty, we come from poverty. We do, I know some people will harp on my teeth, and yes, my teeth are atrocious. If you ever meet me, I don't smile because my teeth are bad. I'll smile like this. I will never show my teeth. I only smile and show my teeth when I'm comfortable around people. But I remember my mother had told us, my sister was 3, that, hey, Christmas is going to be very, very, very light this year. Very light. And I remember my dad, he heard that. And, you're kids, you're like 5, 6, 7 years old. My father would come home at 10, 11 o'clock at night in the blizzards, in the snow. And then he would have that money. He made sure to provide for us. And I think that's what the character of Optimus Prime reminds me of, is the struggles of how you can go from absolutely nothing to pushing yourself to rise above all that. I mean, I know some people can sit there and say, well, Optimus Prime means this to me, Peter Cullen means this to me, blah, blah, blah. But I think like with the recent passing, Peter, and it's just my reflection on what the character meant to me, I guess. You can sit there and go through so much. You can sit there and go through so much. You can go through all the heartache, all the misery. You can lose your job. You can lose, maybe you've got health issues, maybe your car is broke down, maybe this bill's past due, this bill's past due, your rent's due, the bank don't want to talk to you, they don't want to hire. But it's always darkest before the dawn, and the dawn is coming. This was a character that gave a generation and generations afterwards so many quotes that have inspired people, that have pushed people to go beyond their limits. The reason for that is because I remember I wanted this as a kid. My father, I was out with him the day he bought this, and was also there. I realized there was no Santa Claus, but he bought this with his money. He bought this for me for Christmas. He worked hard for that. And it's kind of like, in a sense, it's like he was trying to, basically, not only was he trying to provide for his kids, but he was trying to tell his kids, I'm sorry for everything we're going through. And, I forgave him. Obviously, you forgive him. I mean, he's working hard. He's your father. You love him. But I think he realized what the character meant to me. Oh, hey, Alicia, every generation has that character. Everybody has that superhero they like. Everybody. I know Ray, probably a big fan of Spider-Man or Batman. Sage, Superman. Kluge would be something Star Trek, I'm sure. Everyone has that one character in fiction that, like, they connect with. That's the guy I like. Yeah, we are. I just mentioned it earlier. We lost. If you go back and watch this episode, man, I talk about how I got into this character and how I loved him. We lost the ultimate 80s villain with Tim Curry, and we lost the ultimate 80s good guy with Peter Cullen. Just thinking about that. But, with Peter Cullen, outside of the story I said about the truck driver who, man, there's a lot of other stories of people meeting this man and him being the sweetest guy possible. And you see all over social media. Like, people taking quotes he's made. And a lot of these quotes he added, and have become staples. And yet Legend was I remember Tim Curry was in Legend and The Worst Witch. There were so many quotes from him that was just incredible. Like, and these are quotes that even I carry on to this day, because it, like, helps me reflect on where I've been and who I want to be. Some of those are like, hang on to your dreams. The future is built on them, which is true. A person dreams about, finding a way to solve world hunger or clean the environment. And look at today. We have incredible pieces of technology and breakthroughs in science. We literally have a machine that can pull water vapor or gasoline out of the air and filter it out from oxygen. That's helping save the environment. Another one of his best quotes would have been, wisdom can't be granted, it must be earned. Sometimes at a cost, and wisdom comes with age. It's just so many. And I know some people are probably going to sit there and be like, oh, well, he was just a voice actor. He's not an A-list actor. He's not, Mark Hamill, or he's not an incredibly high-ranking actor. He's not anything special. To you, he may have been, but that's because you only saw him in the role he was in. You only saw him, and no, he'll never be as big as, like, say, Bill Murray or Chevy Chase or um, any of those guys, but he was okay with it. He was 100% okay with that. He didn't mind having, being known as the voice of this character. He didn't mind being known as the voice of a giant robot that turns into a truck that happens to be an alien. He didn't mind it. It's kind of like he embraced the character, and he embraced the fans who loved him for doing the character. My wife's in the other room doing laundry, so that's what that noise is you're hearing. It's okay. She just giggled a little bit. She's walking up the stairs. But, and the thing is, too, is like, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain to someone why Peter Cullen was special. I had a talk with my mom today where I was talking about how, I lost, one of my favorite actors, and she didn't even remember the guy's name. All she knew was he was Optimus Prime. That was it. And we reflected a little bit on, the past, and everything. And, I know I caught a little bit of Ray Lytle's show today, and he mentioned Peter Cullen was just a voice actor. And I get it. You don't know this guy. You don't. But there are people out there who had a connection with the character, and the more they learned about Peter as an individual, the more they connected, the more they realized this is the man I want to be when I grow up. This is what I want my kids to see me as. This is what I want my wife to see me as. It's rather sad when you think about how, and this is how sad it was. This is how sad I was. When I announced in the group chat for everybody, there's our third. Bubba said, well, there's been more than third, which he's right. He's right. But I was in such a mood, and I was so sad about it. I had to go silent because I didn't want to go off on the poor guy, because this was sensitive to me. This was like for people who still can't get over Robin Williams' passing. This is for people who can't get over Chris Cornell's death, or Chester Bennington's, or we'll go one step further to older generations, people who still miss Tupac, who miss Elvis. There are actors who go in, get a paycheck, and they're done. They promote the movie and they're done. There's a dime a dozen. But then there are people who embrace the character, see what this character they have created can bring to the world, and they embrace it and they carry that character. And that's what Peter Cullen was. That's what he was. There's a really interesting story he mentioned about the time he became Optimus Prime, the time he auditioned for the role. He was living with his brother, who, again, his brother, who was named Larry Cullen, who was a Marine. But I'm pretty sure, I don't know if Will Height knows that. I might tell him tomorrow when I see him. They were living together, and Peter mentioned to his brother, I'm going for an audition. And Larry goes, well, where are you going? Peter goes, well, I'm going to audition to be a truck. And Larry, of course, said the whole, truck? What the hell? And Peter's like, oh, yeah, he's a good truck. He's a good guy. And Larry laughed about it a little bit, and he walked up and said, well, Larry, if you're going to audition to be a leader, don't be any of these Hollywood types that do all the macho screaming and the chest pounding and all that. If you're going to be a leader, be strong enough to be gentle. Those are the biggest words that a lot of people live by, and I feel like a lot of people should live by in this day and age. Those are, I know I'm not the best at it, but those are words that I live by. Strong enough to be gentle. Yeah, it'd be easy for me to go off on someone. It'd be easy for me to just, put someone in their place, or you're not doing what I told you to do. Do it this way, boss people around. But in the end, you really don't get anything accomplished with that. And what you end up getting is you get someone who, yeah, they do the job, but they don't like you for it. They're mad, they're upset, all that. They're angry. Maybe you have someone who messes up too many times. Oh, sure, it'd be easy to get on them. Or you fucked up too many times, blah blah blah, and all that shit. But if you're strong enough to be gentle, you can literally talk to a person not as like they're an asset or a commodity. You talk to them as if they're a person, as if like their life matters, your life matters. And I try and talk to everybody like that. I do. It, it is something I feel like, yeah, strong enough to be gentle. I feel like it's something maybe every human being on this planet should learn. I mean, and every hero has his catchphrase. Batman's is "I am vengeance, I am the night." Um, Superman's is "Truth, justice, the American way." Or now it's "Truth, justice, and freedom," I believe. Spider-Man's is "With great power comes great responsibility." And then you have Optimus's, which is "Strong enough to be gentle." And I think for a lot of kids and a lot of people growing up in that age, a lot of people like me, who actually saw this show more than just a crummy, stupid Saturday morning cartoon show to eat Frosted Flakes with. I think a lot of people saw that and they realized how incredible that thought was. And you see generations nowadays with the movies, when they came out with the live action movies, you saw a lot of people who were introduced to the character and the franchise in ways that I never thought possible. I mean, I hate to pick on them, I do, but like take Ray for example. Ray loves Star Wars. He loves superheroes. He cannot understand this. He can't. I've offered to teach him, like explain it to him, like why this stuff is important. And it's fine that he's not interested. He's got his corner. He's got his area. He loves his Star Wars. He loves his DC. He loves his comic books. And that's fine. It's totally fine. It's understandable. But it's one of those things where it may not matter to someone like him. I have a friend named Matt who literally he wanted to get a tattoo and he decided not to get a tattoo. He said it looked like a Transformer symbol. He hates Transformers. And I get it. I absolutely 100% get it. I understand. But it's more like, with this, I get they're cheesy characters. I get it's an 80s cartoon that's ran a long time. But if you look at the characters, I mean, and some of them have the dumbest names. Like, there's a character over there, his name is Bumper. I mean, who names a character Bumper? There's a character there named Dead End. But if you look past that and you actually watch the shows, read the stories, watch the movies, and you see what they go through, what the characters go through, and you see what is wrote, then you get a better grasp of this. You get a better grasp and you get a better enjoyment for this. And I feel like that is something that we were given by getting a small glimpse into this world. And we have our own heroes that way. We lost one today. We lost our Superman. you know? And I mean, did I cry? Yes, I shed some tears. He was my hero. He was inspiration to everyone. He was an all around 100% positive ball of energy. He was a 100% all around positive person, you know. And I see it everywhere online. People are talking, about it. But I just wanted to get on here. I've talked too long. I told Susan, my wife, I'd only be up down here for like 20 minutes or so, and I'm going on almost a half hour, more than a half hour. But these are just ramblings of somebody who honestly just is thankful that such a man was able to actually bring life to a character like this. I mean, this is a guy who never turned his back on the fandom. He never went for a higher paycheck. He never went for, well, we can give you this role here if you quit doing this. He's like, no, 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 I'm staying with Transformers. And he's done the character, and he's turned down jobs because he thought it would insult the character. He wanted the character to be preserved the way people recognize and memorize it. And I think the big thing is like, I'm going to miss him greatly. I don't know if I'll be able to look at the franchise again without thinking about his voice. But I'm not going to forget him. You know, would I have liked to have met him? Yeah, I would have liked to have met him once, but can't now. You know, I do know that with everything that's happened these past few days, with the amount of losses we've lost, death needs to stay the fuck away from people. Death needs to stop. Somebody needs to go punch death in the face for what's happened. I would say, even though he's gone, even though Peter Cullen's gone, and even though we may or may not have, you know, even though he's gone, and we don't know what happens next, I'm pretty sure they'll recast the next person to play Optimus may be good. We don't know. I do know that the things that Peter Cullen taught us, the things he's taught us for years, have always and will always remain. And I feel like that is his legacy. That what he's taught us and what he's taught us through the character and by talking to him, that's worth more than its weight in gold. And I think that's like the best thing about him. So these are just my talk. This is just my ramblings, my talks about, what happened. Um, I don't think it was a good talk, really. I kind of rambled a little bit. I got off topic, but I'm also running on only 3 hours of sleep. I've worked all day, and I wanted to get this out there before it got too late. If I could say anything to you to close this out, there's one quote he said that I feel truly means the best, that I feel truly reflects on tonight. And it's in one of the movies. He goes, whenever you look up to the stars, picture one of them as my soul. But I think tonight, for all you kids and all you people who are missing them, go out tonight, look up at a star, pick one, and say, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter Cullen. Well, I'm going to close this out. We'll be back tomorrow with our. I'll be more rested and awake, so I'll be more coherent. We'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully, we won't have. Hopefully, this cycle ends. But we'll be back tomorrow with our usual comedy show. Make sure you tune in. We got huge announcements coming up. We've got to Ask Dr. Sage. Get your questions in now to askdrsage@gmail.com. And you guys have a good night. You're only a few hours away from the weekend. We got this, okay? God bless you all. God bless you, Peter Cullen, and everyone we lost. And until all are one. This is Tyler saying have a good day and a better one tomorrow. Good night, everybody.